So in section 3.8, we look at factoring polynomials, but two special types of polynomials. One being perfect square trinomials, as well as the other one being difference of squares trinomials. And there's a complicated way that you could remember how to factor both of those, and this is really the complicated way. If you can remember these kind of formulas in order to see, well, okay, if I have a polynomial in this form, then it will factor out to something like this with either of these two. Okay, so that being a little bit difficult, if we look at a few key points or details about how those factors work, then we will be able to find a different way to work through factoring perfect square trinomials. So let's do just a quick review and make sure that we are all on the same page here. Let's factor x squared plus 4x plus 4. Remember, at this point you should be going, okay, I need two numbers that will multiply together to give me 4, and those same two numbers are going to add together to give me 4 as well. And I go through my factors of 4, and I go 1 and 4 and 2 and 2, and I realize, well, my answer has got to be both positive 2 and positive 2, because 2 times 2 is 4, and positive 2 plus positive 2 is 4. Now that I have that, I write by binomial factors, brackets, I put my x in the front, and I go plus 2, filling in the numbers I've just found right here. This, though, looks a little interesting. This is one thing multiplied by that same thing again, which is actually, excuse me, x plus 2 squared. It's exactly what it means. And if I do this other example, x squared minus 6x plus 9, I do the same type of idea. Two numbers that multiply together to give 9. Those same two numbers add together to give us negative 6. What are those two numbers? Well, our factors of 9 are 1 and 9 and 3 and 3. But because we have this negative, we know we have to start playing with positives and negatives. And in order for this to work, to get a positive answer, they both have to be negative. So they're both going to be negative. And then, of course, well, 3 times 3 is 9, and 3 plus 3 is 6. So negative 3 and negative 3 is negative 6. So my numbers are negative 3 and negative 3. I go to my brackets, write down my brackets, go x minus 3 minus 3. And then again, you see, well, this binomial is exactly the same as the second binomial. So really, I could simplify this and write x minus 3 all squared, because that's exactly what that means. X minus 3 multiplied by itself. And then we look at this next example. Can you factor 4a squared plus 20a plus 25? Well, we could go through those steps and try and figure out two numbers. Whoops, remember, two numbers in this case that multiply together to give us a times c, multiply together to give 100, and add together to give us 20. And we could go through those steps and we could figure out what the factors are and do exactly what we've done in the past. But here's a little bit of a shortcut. If you can remember what these are, you can go straight from this form to this form, provided you can figure out what all of these things work out to and how they work. If I'm looking at this right now, if I follow my steps, this is a perfect square trinomial. How do I know that this is a perfect square trinomial? Well, I know that because this first term I could take the square root of. This last term I could also take the square root of. So I could take the square root of both of those. If I took the square root of both of those, 2a and 5, and I multiplied them by each other, 10a, and then I multiplied by 2, I would get 20a. That's how I know it's a perfect square trinomial. So I'm kind of doing that all in my head, and really that's what these forms of the formulas go through. If I have a trinomial in this form, which means, well, if I take a times b, which means I've taken the square root of this and the square root of this, a times b, and multiplied by 2, I get my middle term. If I can do that, then my factored form is going to end up as a plus b squared, a plus b all squared. So those are the steps I really have to follow. So I'm going to stop this video now. I'm going to pick up the next video by going through all 4 of these examples at once. If you wanted to, you could look ahead. Remember, you're looking for what? Here we go. Perfect square of the last term. Perfect square of the last term. Perfect square of the first term. Take those two, multiply them together. 2a times 5, give me 10a. Multiply it by 2 to see if you get that middle term. If you get that middle term, then you're going to have one of these two forms of factored forms for this polynomial. Okay? So I'll pick those examples up in the next video.